You're probably not the richest guy on the planet, but you just dream of owning a Porsche. What if we tell you that you can find Porsche cars being sold for as low as $8,000? You will be amazed at what Porsches you can find without having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars or go deep in debt. Let's see which are some of the cheapest models currently available on the market. The 911 model. Soon, most 911 models will be out of the market, but if you are lucky enough, you can still find one for sale. Believe it or not, there are some great 911 Porsche models out there that cost only $20,000. Even though this means getting a second-generation car, these 1974 to 1977 Porsche models are surprisingly affordable, ranging for up to $30,000 or less. The most preferred one out of these models was the production of 1999 to 2005, which was known as the 996 course. In this kind of setback, the 3.5-liter flat six was similar to the already existing booster engine design of the 911, but the thing with the later version of the car is that it uses 296 horsepower. With all this left aside, is the 996 the best, cheapest version for a Porsche car? Well, maybe, because the 2000 to 2001 300 horsepower Porsche Carrera model is slightly more reliable. These 2000 models can be found more frequently on the market, and some have run even less than 60,000 miles since their production. If you're lucky enough, you can find this model for only $25,000 with included convertibles. Many Porsche cars that were produced earlier are less collectible than any other car due to being used vastly by people. But since these are versions that were produced 20, 30, and even 40 years ago, knowing a little bit more about the car maintenance is a must and should be at the top of your list. This is because these vehicles were produced in the era of the Dread International shaft, otherwise known as the IMS. Their engine running has a high failure probability that affects 10% of all this model's engines after running for over 90,000 miles. Knowing about car maintenance, however, will allow you to understand more about the diagnosis. Another thing on the list of diagnoses that could happen to this car is that most of these models come with a perennial leaky main seal, but usually it is normal for every car that has run over 30,000 miles to have these problems. Usually, both of these problems are renovated to boost cost and encourage buyers to purchase the car. But still, you should expect that this car is likely to drip oil or water on plenty of other places. With the price you get it for, it is still quite expensive, considering the problems that it comes with. The 914 model. You might recall what the cars of the 1980s looked like, and you probably remember these funky Targa Porsches. They were all the rage in the 80s and were driven broadly and slowly by hipsters and commune refugees that wore handmade sandals. But another memorable thing about the 914 models was that they made new users find out what Porsche had to offer with their cars. The model was one of the most affordable on the market, but has still built on a turning scene that lasted up to this day. From all the four versions released from 1970 to 1976, the 6-cylinder 914 model is the most desirable one of all. Now, this model costs only around $50,000, which is quite affordable when you compare it to other Porsche prices. But you can find these 914 Porsche versions for less if you buy one that offers just 75% of the performance. Considering that it is a 2-liter 4-cylinder car that runs with 95 horsepower, it's not a bad deal if you like to tell your neighbors that you own a Porsche. The car model offers big heavy bumpers that are the second reason for its price dropping. When releasing the 914, the project originally arose from a collaboration with Volkswagen. The 2-liter 4-cylinder cars were built by Karmann, which was a Volkswagen supplier. This is what gave this model similar rust issues that Volkswagen models which were released around the same period had. So, if you're planning on purchasing this model, expect loads of endless rust. Any part of the Porsche is pretty expensive, but for these models, you'll find them super cheap as they fall apart a lot. It's quite a fun model as you will be finding cheap Porsche's parts to fix it, and even tell funny stories to people about how your Porsche decided to leave you stranded on the road a few weeks ago. The Boxster. Many of us still cannot believe that the Boxster was released around 20 years ago. It was the first affordable Porsche car on the market at that time, and 2 decades later, it still hasn't compromised on its performance. Since they were first introduced to the market, over 300,000 Boxster models have been sold, and this can only mean one thing, that they are extremely cheap. The newest versions of these models can go up to $40,000, but older Tiptronic ones can even be found for as low as $8,000. Getting a model that was produced later on in 2003 and 2004 will help a lot when it comes to performance. These most recent models give give you a 2.7-liter flat 6/8 225 horsepower from VarioCam. And not to forget the glass back window and Boxster-S suspension that were also featured in the previous year's model. But as the saying goes, you get what you pay for. And the startup price for the Boxster is quite a bargain. For a Boxster Porsche that has run around 60,000 miles, you are looking to get offered a price of $12,500. If the model is a Boxster S run with 258 horsepower, you could expect to spend $3,000 extra. However, there are a few problems with the older Tiptronic cars. The IMS bearing, the porous engine fiasco blocks, oil seals, and cylinder liners require frequent maintenance. The oil changes for these models are vital, and with the proper maintenance, these models are good to go. The 928 model. This model set the time when Porsche decided to enter unfamiliar territory. The 928 version wasn't technically considered a sports car. It was a GT, but many people thought of it as a muscle car. Its sharp look made it look very strange, according to Porsche buyers. After it was introduced all across Europe in 1977, the 4.7-liter V8 coupe that worked on a 300 horsepower made its way in the US and muted other 4.5-liter cars that worked on 234 horsepower. In 1987, the US market started producing a new version of the 928 models that ran on 320 horsepower. This new version was able to hit a maximum of 165 miles an hour, but when compared to the 1992 and the 1995 GTS versions, these releases are reasonably priced. These versions are all reliable too, so there's no reason to settle for one that needs expensive maintenance. The newer V8 model was capable of much more when compared to the older 928 models, as its power crept up to a high 350 horsepower that ran by a 5.4-liter. By 1992, the price of this model went up to $80,000, which is pretty much the same price as a modern BMW 8 Series. But now, 30 years later, you can find this model averaging around $28,000 to $38,000. The 228 Porsche has been well made, but rather than the fact that it's quite a complicated car, its air conditioning and radio features are both very expensive to repair. On the other hand, the V8 model has its repair problems, which include a water pump and seal replacement that should be repaired every 45,000 miles, and a timing belt that should be replaced every 30,000 miles. The 944 Turbo model. Different from the 98 Porsche, which was built more for grown-ups, this version was considered more of a boy racer car. Like many other models that got produced in the 80s and the 90s, this model came in various styles. The overall production of the 944 ended in 1991, and since then, the prices of this model have dropped increasingly. Now they can be found for around $20,000. However, if you are choosing a 1988 Turbo naturally aspirated cabriolet version, this can easily cost you up to $10,000 more. The final Turbo models that were considered a limited edition were the 1998 Turbo S and 1989 Turbo. Both run on 247 horsepower that can go up to 60 miles per hour in 5.7 seconds. So, expect to pay around $47,000 for these limited edition versions. Since Porsche has produced over 25,000 assorted turbos, nowadays you can find used turbo parts for a reasonable price. These Porsche models need the oil change from time to time, and that goes the same for the turbos. A 944 Turbo is a square shape, which means that it needs top services. Its front-end seals and water pump need to be replaced every 30,000 miles. But a turbo replacement doesn't come cheap, because it is 16 hours of labor for the dealership that is going to replace it. This renovation will cost you around $3,000. What to consider? Since there aren't any affordable exotic cars out there, getting the right one is the most important decision of all. The time and parts that are used for the 914 1973 model cost around $9,000, which is not a penny less than what you would pay for the 1973 911 or Boxster S. For some of these old models, finding someone that owns a parts interchange manual is considered very lucky. In the manual, you'll find a similar Timken pinion bearing that goes up to $260 for a Porsche, which is almost 3 times the price of a Volkswagen. But this is the price you pay for owning a Porsche. It's not only a car that gives you high quality and high performance, which you can take around daily, it also wants affection and for you to get greasy with it. It certainly wants 2 things from you: your passion and your attention. These models are awesome, and you should probably own one of them. Which Porsche model is your favorite? Let us know what you think down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give us a big thumbs up. Thank you for watching.